Renee, unmute yourself. We shall start now.
So, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone from where you are joining this webinar on sustainable management and utilization of Rattan resources, which is part of the in-bar webinar series, a technique that we developed to keep in touch with our member state and sympathizers during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I would like, first of all, to thank you for taking time to join this webinar, and also to our speakers who have taken time to collaborate with us in organizing this event. So today we are talking about one of the most valuable non-timber forest product, which is rattan. We know globally we have approximately 600 species worldwide. And to describe rattan, these are spiny clubbing palms that belong to the subfamily Calamoideae. The world rattan resource is already under threat. This is something we cannot overstate. And this is due to unsustainable harvesting practices and deforestation, leading to a loss of germplasm and even the threat to extinction of some of these species. Rattan is economically very important because the global trade is around $250 million, and 20% of the 600 species that I have mentioned are economically important. And rattan provides livelihood to about 700 million people. So what can we do to overcome this unsustainable management of rattan resources? This is what we are going to try to address today. So our webinar will address how to enhance the awareness of the needs for the improvement of rattan resources, understanding the means to achieve sustainability to plantation, and familiarization of the stakeholders about the different choices, options, and method for management. And for this webinar, we are happy to have three, I would say, best researchers of Rattan. So I'm going to present them in the order that they will speak. They will speak today. So we are going to have three presentations. And following the presentations, we are going to have a session of Q&A. So our three various team presenters today are Dr. Muralidharidan Enough Maviton from the Kerala Forest Institute. So he's a senior principal scientist, and his interest has been involved in the collection of rattan, bamboo, and thick germplasm and its characterization. So we have Dr. Srekumar VB, who is also working for the Kerala Forest Institute. He has conducted extensive research on resource inventory, taxonomy assessment, and genetic diversity, including rattan. And the next speaker will be Dr. William Basolo, who is the Dean of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources of the University of the Philippines, Los Banos. So his research interest has been on non-timber forest product, including rattan and bamboo. So each of these speakers is going to cover different topics, and each will have around 30 minutes to share with us their research. We are going to plead with all the speakers to try as much as possible to keep to the time frame. So I'm going to invite our first speaker today, which is Dr. Srekumar VB, who is going to present on rattan resources of the world's species diversity, ecology, and uses. So Dr. Srekumar, over to you for half an hour.
Thank you very much, Rani. I will be speaking about rattan resource of the world, species diversity, and rattan ecology and uses. So we know that rattans are spiny climbing palms, and it is a key component of tropical rainforest, belong to the subfamily Calamodiae of Ericaceae. So the term rattan, which is derived from the Malayan word Rattan, that is the local name of spiny palms. So as a integral component of forest, rattans provide, it is one of the major non-timber forest products, especially for the furniture and handicraft industry. And many rural people are depending on the for their economy, the rural economy, from the rattan industry. So the rattans provide a wide array of ecosystem services. So if you can look the rattan systems in UN Sustainable Development Goals. So rattans can be best fit into the poverty reduction, energy, housing, and urban development, climate change, in food security, and women's empowerment, economic growth, and technology. So regard to the distribution of rattans, rattans are widely distributed throughout the Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, Chile, And the maximum species richness is represented in the Southeast Asian countries, that is especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, China, India, and other adjoining countries. The major rattan genera, one of the important genus is Calamus and Corthalsia, then Plectocomia, then Eremospatha, Lacosperma, Marialepis, Onchocalamus, and Plectocomiopsis. The genera like Eremospatha, Lacosperma, Onchocalamus are restricted to the African region, where the other rattan genera like Calamus, Corthalsia, Marialepis are found in the Asia Pacific region. And the exception is presence of one species, Calamus diratus, in African region. So some of the genera like Ceratolobus, another important genus Demonerops, Pogonotium retispatha. So these the species under these genera are treated as a synonymy under Calamus as per the recent molecular phylogenetic studies. So rattans are either solitary or cluster forming. In the case of clustering species, there are some special structures like presence of stolons, and in the case of some species with aerial branches are also reported. So the presence of climbing organs and the presence of spines in all foliar organs, that is an important feature of rattans. And the leaf sheath, its color, size, pattern of arrangement of spines, it vary from species to species. So the major climbing organs, that is flagellum and cirrus. Flagellum is a whip-like climbing organ derived from an inflorescence with reflected spines, and cirrus is another whip-like extension of from the leaf rachis. It is also armed with spines. So the species with the presence of flagellum, the cirrus is absent, and vice versa. So in leaf sheath, the ochrea, which is an extension of the leaf sheath beyond the petiole insertion, that is another important feature of in rattans. So we can have a look into the different pattern of leaf sheath in rattans. This is one of the major identifying feature. In some species, you can see it will be pointing towards the downside. This is an important species in Calamus thoitici. It is spines are rigid and arranged like a semi-lunar structure, and in the case of some species, bristle-like spines, and in some species it is bulbous based. So in some species, leaf sheath, the presence of tomentum is another important feature, and in some species, it is completely devoid of spines. So, like the leaf sheath, rattan fruits, that is also important for the identification of different species. So the species having different shape like ovoid, obovoid, oblate, and the presence of scales with the presence of margins and the presence of an apical beak in the fruit. So rattans possess wide differences in the shape, color, and size of the fruits. So these are different species. You can see the difference. So coming to the ecology of rattans, so rattans are distributed in a wide geographical range matched with great ecological diversity. It can be seen from the sea level, especially the common species like Calamus rattan to 3000-meter elevation. And rattans are mainly found in the evergreen forest, and some species are also seen in the dry forest and swamps and high altitude montane forest. So the species like Calamus mannan, Calamus ornatus, and Calamus andamanicus. So these are high climbing rattans, especially in huge diprocarps and pterocarps. So these species require sufficient light for further growth and development. So in the case of species like Calamus viminalis, Mariolepis paradoxa, Plectocomiopsis geminiflora, and Eremospatha macrocarpa, the species, these kind of species which are mainly found in the disturbed forest, which also require a high light intensity for the maximum growth. So in the case of some species like Calamus calicarpus, Calamus didymophilus, so these are shade tolerant species that prefer to grow under the forest canopy. So these are slowly growing species under shade conditions. So regard to the with different soil regimes, rattans are found from the Meristica sound to dry ridge tops. So some species have ability to withstand permanent waterlogging, and the species like Calamus trachicolius, Calamus duratus, it can be adapted to flooded habitats. The Calamus solingeri and Eremospatha cabrea, these species are found in the Meristica, not in Meristica, some of the zombie regions. So the rattans can grow best in the deep, fertile alluvial soils with high moisture and organic content, and the abundance it is tend to be increased in moderate to high light conditions with well-drained soils. So the major factors affecting the growth, it is the availability of light, the type of soil conditions, then elevation, and the soil moisture. This is another important ecological aspects of rattans. There is a close symbiotic relationship between ants and rattans, especially the genera like Lacosperma, Onchocalamus, Corthalsia, and Plectocomia. So the elongated ochreas of the different genera and different species of these different genera are colonized by ants. So the seed dispersal, we have sufficient work on the dispersal ecology of rattan seeds. It is dispersed by mandrill, hornbill, even elephants, and the genera like Calamus and Plectocomia, the Asian palm civets, are major dispersers of rattan seeds. So regard to diameter, you can see different diameter classes, but the classification is two type of on the diameter classes, that is small diameter and large diameter. But the diameter it is varies from 18 to 20 mm, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, and up to 40 mm. So the large diameter rattans, which are mainly used for the furniture frames, like Calamus mannan, Calamus tumidus, Calamus andamanicus, and Calamus polystris. And the small diameter rattans, it is used in split forms, or it's used for tying, and for mainly for some handicrafts and basketry. So the stem length, it is the average stem length is between 30 to 50 meter. But in some case, Berkeley in 1935 reported around 175 meter length in rattans. So regard to use, the important use is for the furniture and handicraft industry, and the world trade over is 6.5 billion US dollar per annum, and the rattan, the raw material, and rattan woven rattan alone amounted to 0.38 billion US dollars. So with this huge market, so Indonesia is having around 37 hectare of rattan cultivation area. and followed by Malaysia with about 31,000 hectares. So another like bamboo shoots, rattan edible shoot, it is another major livelihood option for the rural communities. So the tender part is edible, and mainly the small diameter shoots are preferred for cultivation, which are very easy to grow, and more shoots are produced, especially on this clustering species. So you can rattan soups and several delicious dishes from rattans, edible shoots. So this is a photo from the Northeast India where the rattan shoots we can see in the rural areas. Then some species are having edible, these are the major species with edible shoots. Calamus duratus, Calamus viminalis, Nambarensis, tenuis, which is found in Northeast India, Nepal, and in the Lavopedia. Then Calamus nambarensis, Sparsiflorus, Lacosperma, secundiflorum. So these species, the edible shoots are preferred. Then edible fruits, the important species like Calamus manilensis in Philippines, and Calamus longicetus, Calamus viminalis. It is widely distributed in Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Laos, Peninsular Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. Like Calamus rattan, it is also, the fruits are edible. Calamus tenuis, which is also widely distributed. So several species, the fruits are that pulpy region of the fruit is edible. Regard to the other uses, it is used for the preparation of brooms. The Calamus tenuis, it is an example. Then the seeds, it is chewed along with the betel nut as a narcotic, especially in the case of Calamus erectus. Then leaflets, it is used as a cigarette paper. The species like Calamus longispathus and leptospus, and leaves, it is chewed as a vermifuge. Then in some seeds are also used for the preparation of necklace, bead necklace. The species like Calamus draco, the fruit is a source of red resin. It is used both medicinally and as a dye. The other species are Calamus didymophilus, maculatus, Calamus ruber, Calamus micracanthus. So in some rattans, the roots are also showing some medicinal properties. So this is another important uses. The rattan, it's with its ability to scaffold and support damaged bonds. One of the Italian company, Green Bond, they are under trials on rattan bonds. Implants are at the levels of human trials. So the species mentioned is Calamus tenuis. Then rattans are closely associated with our culture and religious aspects. This photo is from Kerala, where the entire spiny root is uprooted. The plant is uprooted, and the devotee, it is totally wrapped around the body and performing a kind of ritualistic dance, and it is treated as sacred. So in Indonesia also there are agroforestry green gardens, rattan gardens, with its own heritage values, and these rattan gardens are inherited to the next generation, and they are treating this as a it is a connective mechanism with their ancestors. INBAR jointly with IPGRI have published a priority rattan species in 1998. That is for development of plantations and intercropping, and for the conservation aspects, and for developing suitable social forestry programs. So for each country, preferred their based on their uses and furniture industry, different species are listed, like Calamus manan for Borneo, Malaysia, Sumatra, and Thailand, and Calamus satius for a wide range of countries like Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, Philippines. Then Calamus nagbatai and Calamus andamanicus for India, Calamus foxworthy for Philippines, Merrily also for Philippines. Then Calamus ovoides and Calamus ceylanicus for Sri Lanka, and Calamus polystris for Andaman Islands, Myanmar, China, Laos, and Vietnam. Calamus tetradactylus, that is for China. So I think this list needs to be updated, and for depending on the users, particular users, this list needs to be revised for developing suitable plantations. Then we know the rattans, it is severely exploited on a species level, because some species are preferred. For example, in the case of Calamus andamanicus, it is one of the large diameter rattan. So the IUCN red list, if you can see the IUCN red list, around 5 species are critically endangered. Calamus obovoides, sabalensis, Veilon, Hermospatha berendi, and 4 are endangered. Interestingly, around 25 species are treated in least concern category. But I think this list needs to be revised because most of the rattan species having narrow genetic basis, and some of the species, its distribution is restricted to some pockets. So the IUCN red list needs to be systematically updated. So with regard with all this, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Srekumar, thanks very much for the very insightful presentation, where you have succinctly covered the different diversity on species-wise of rattan that we have, the ecology of the rattan, the uses, the provision of sustainable livelihood to people, and how this is interlinked with our culture and beliefs. So now we are going to move to our second speaker, which is Dr. Murali. So Dr. Murali is going to deliver a presentation on the propagation, nurseries, and plantation management in rattan. So this is very important, because these are one of the tools that we can use to reverse the current unsustainable management of rattan resources. So Dr. Murali, if you are ready, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rennie, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'll be speaking on propagation, nurseries, and plantation management in rattans. I too work with the Kerala Forest Research Institute, and we are in the southern tip of the Indian Peninsula, where the biodiversity of rattan is really great. And our institute has been doing research on several aspects of rattan for the past several decades. As Dr. Srekumar mentioned, rattans are among the most important of non-timber forest products, and this resource is under threat. Rattans support the livelihood of a significant number of rural communities engaged in collection and utilization of this resource. But significant quantities of rattan are still collected from the natural forest, from the wild. So this collection is mostly unregulated and therefore unsustainable for many in many countries. This overexploitation has led to depletion of stocks and loss of genetic diversity in many of the important species. So there is a need for rattan plantations, and we need sustainably managed rattan plantations since they are critical for the future of the rattan industry. The major producer of rattan, Indonesia, does not permit export of raw rattan, and several other countries may follow suit. And the importing nations need to consider cultivation as an alternative. The cultivation is also important in the context of climate change resilience and to take advantage of the ecosystem functions of rattan forests and plantations. To ensure sustainability of rattan resources, as I said, cultivation is the only option, and the cultivation of the important rattan species is essential to cater to the increasing demand for high quality raw material, raw canes. And we require a management regime that permits adequate regeneration of stocks of rattan in the forest. And to achieve that, we probably will have to implement a rational harvesting protocol. And the plantations have been actually established in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, India, and other countries, but with varying level of success. So what we require is standardization of the planting and management practices based on scientific principles. And this will involve 4 major aspects. One is the selection of species and then matching them to the sites that we select for plantations. And then the protection of planting stock using suitable propagation methods. And there are several methods which I will come to a bit later. And then we need to adopt the best practices for establishment of plantations. And after having established that, manage it in a sustainable manner until harvesting is initiated. There are 3 types of plantations. The first one is those which are established in natural forests, and this is usually done for commercial canes, but also for ecosystem functions that they serve. The second type is a home garden plantation, which the private homesteads have. This is usually done for cultivating edible shoots in those countries where it is popular, and also for canes. And sometimes the thatching material is obtained from the rattan leaves, which are available in plenty. And the third type is the commercial plantations on large scale, where it is done for production of canes, and also in some countries for edible shoots. There are plantations exclusively for edible shoots. In countries like in India, the rattan is entirely under state-owned forests, so the government policies are implemented and are relevant, whereas other countries have rattan on private as well as state-owned land. Here you can see in the photograph here a plantation established for edible shoots. This is in India, an experimental plantation. And you have a photo below where the in a homestead the rattan is grown on a teak tree. Besides that, you'll find pepper vines also growing in the home garden. Coming to selection of species, this is based on several factors. The most important ones are you need to establish, find out a species which is suitable to the existing site, the ecophysiological conditions that prevail there. Dr. Srikumar has mentioned about the diversity of rattan available around the world. These extend from plants growing in the sea level right up to more than 3,000 meters. So you have a diversity of species from which to choose, and also there are species which grow in the open, don't require a tree support, while there are others which come only under the tropical evergreen forest. Next, we need to look at the growth rate and productivity of these species that you select, because you need economic viability of the plantation in a reasonable period of time. So obviously the rattan species that grow faster are preferred. And we need to look at whether the species are resistant to pests and diseases, because we are going to plant the plantation on a large scale, and pests and diseases would be a big risk. Now we need to also look at the preference of the local communities there, which species they can utilize for making products, and whether the local skills available are suited for that. And whatever products that come out would need to be having a market demand, and a marketing avenue has to be found out for selling those products, all contributing to sustaining a livelihood of the rural community. And there are cultural factors that may also play an important role, because Rattans are very closely associated with certain cultures and traditions, and we need to look at that too. When you select the site, we need to look at whether specific conditions are met. Most rattans grow in areas where there is abundant and well-distributed rainfall, and the optimum light availability is somewhere around 50 to 60% of the full sunlight, and we need to select sites which permit that kind of light availability. When it comes to soils, rattans prefer acidic, loamy soils with moderate water holding capacity and high moisture content in the soil, and a relative humidity of around 70% or more is suitable. And as I said earlier, suitable support trees are required, but of course there are other species that can grow without tree support as well. Now these requirements are typically met in natural forest, especially in the fringes, and in logged over forests where a few trees are remaining, and rubber and timber plantations can support a rattan crop. These can also be grown along swamps, in the swamps along the river banks, or in dikes along the paddy fields. Some rattans are suited to open sites without trees, as I said, and others can come up in even degraded natural forests where a few trees are remaining. Next, let us examine the different methods of propagating rattan. 4 methods are there, where you use seeds, wildlings, vegetative propagation, and for large-scale tissue culture or micropropagation. The first method, where seeds are used, rattan seeds are produced in copious quantities, fruits are produced in copious quantities when they flower. And rattan seeds have a hard, scaly pericarp and a soft, pulpy sarcotesta, which is within the pericarp, and you have a hard ruminate endosperm, which also encloses the embryo. Rattans are mostly dioecious plants, which means that male and female flowers are formed on different plants. So you need to have a good ratio of these male and female plants for fruit, for pollination and food production. Now, when seeds are available, even though it's available in very large quantities, they lose viability rapidly, and unless you store it at a low temperature of around 16 degrees and conserving the moisture, storage cannot go beyond 3 to 4 months. And when seeds are available, you collect the fruits when they are mature, and it's possible to ascertain whether the seeds are mature by pressing it between the fingers, and the soft pulpy sarcotesta is an indication that the seeds are mature. And the sarcotesta is the pericarp is crushed. The seeds are soaked in water for 1 to 2 days until the pulpy matter is easily removable. And the cleaned seeds are then germinated in trays or nursery bed. And this usually has a 3 centimeter layer of sand or moist sawdust on the top, so that seedlings, when they formed, can easily be transplanted. Now, the seeds are placed under shade and kept moist by regular watering, and you can expect the seeds to germinate in about 3 weeks, sometimes a month or more in some species. The other method is to use wildlings. Wildlings are actually the seeds that germinate naturally in the forest and are found in very large numbers. And since most of them do not survive to grow to maturity, these can be collected and used for propagation when they are collected at the early stages before the roots have really gone down into the soil. These seedlings are then transferred to polybags, and hardening is done as in the seedlings. You might need to sometimes trim the leaves to prevent transplant shock. Now, wildlings are difficult to collect, labor intensive, so it's bound to be more expensive than propagation through seedlings. So when enough seedlings are available, we wouldn't be using wildlings as a method of propagation. The other method is vegetative propagation, where some of the rattans of the clustering type can be propagated using suckers or rhizomes. And these rhizomes are extracted and should have sufficient roots, and then it's hardened in the nurseries like the seedlings. And it has been shown that treatment with rooting hormones like naphthalene acetic acid improves the survival rate of the suckers and rhizomes. The next method is micropropagation, which is a technique that is used only for mass cloning, mass multiplication. So this involves the culture of tissues in sterile and controlled conditions on a tissue culture medium, nutrient medium, in the presence of hormones. And this requires specialized facilities, and skilled technicians are required to carry out the procedure. And only when you require large-scale multiplication, this technique is used, because the multiplication rates are much higher than any of the other methods. The added advantage is that regenerated plants are disease and pest free because it is a sterile technique. And also plants are uniform in size and physiological status. As of today, the technology for cloning mature canes is yet to be standardized. So as I said, the technology is currently of limited use since seed availability is not a great constraint in most of the important species. Here you can see the plants of tissue cultured plants of rattan after they are placed in the mist chamber for hardening and transferred to a polybag and hardened in the nursery. Let's talk about what happens in the nursery. The seedlings, through whatever method they have been generated, have to be transplanted to soil in polythene bags, and this is usually done when the first leaf unfolds. And in the polybag, medium consisting of soil, sand, and manure in various proportions are usually used. And hardening of the seedlings is done in the nursery under 50% shade net, and it takes about a year before planting out to the field is possible. The layout of the nursery is the factors that has to be considered are that you usually set up a nursery near the plantation site to prevent the expense of and the effort of transporting the plants over long distances. And the nurseries are set up on flat land with adequate water supply. A raised bed is made to prevent waterlogging, and the beds are typically of 12 into 1.2 meters in size. And as I said, 50% shade is provided along with provision for watering. Luckily for us, the incidence of diseases and pests in rattan nurseries is relatively low compared to many other forest crops. But the predisposing factors are that during the depulping, extended soaking of seeds might damage seeds and result in fungal and bacterial growth. If you use contaminated germination media with fungal spores in it, this could result in fungal dieback or damping off. And overwatering in nurseries also can be a cause. In this table here, I've listed some of the important diseases that you find in the nurseries and the causative organism, usually a fungus, and the treatments where either as a prophylactic method or for treatment. Next, once the planting stock is ready, let us see how the plantations are established. These are influenced by 4 factors: the planting season, the spacing adopted, the support trees, as I mentioned already, and the light availability. The planting season is usually the onset of rains. In India, especially in the southern part, it is the onset of the monsoons in June. And the pits are prepared well in advance in the summer, and pits of 30 into 30 into 30 centimeter are made. And the spacing adopted is typically 5 into 5 meters, but there are cases where even smaller spacing or bigger spacing is adopted, depending on the site. And rows of the planting is done in rows in the east-west orientation and is preferred because of the optimal light availability. And because the trees, because the rattans are require support trees, and once it grows, it has to climb the support trees. The pits are dug about 0.5 meter to 1 meter from the support trees. The support trees are actually selected based on their capability to withstand the weight of the fully grown rattan. And as you can imagine, the clustering large diameter rattans would attain very high weights when they are mature, and they need larger trees. Generally, teak, melina, hopia, Detocarpus, Artocarpus, and acacia species have been used in different countries. And light availability, as I mentioned, it is desirable to plant in canopy gaps and in the east-west orientation to increase the light availability. You can see here in the photographs how the planting has been done in the forest and the early stages of seedlings in the forest floor. Once the planting is done, then the management of the planting involves tending only up to 2 to 3 years after planting. Regular visits are required, mainly to check for any fallen branches. Some mortality need to be replaced. You need to have light weeding because otherwise the climbers and would actually smother the young plants and compete for the nutrients and light. So both for weeding and shade management, you need to make visits to the plantation. Rattan plantations are usually not irrigated because the type of location you select, the soil moisture is good enough. And there have been experiments on fertilization at the early stages of the plantation. It has shown benefits, but requires standardization. I'm sure Dr. Abasolo will be dealing with this aspect in his talk immediately after mine. And around 10 to 15 years after planting, you would find the rattans have matured enough in most cases for harvesting. In some of the smaller species, it could be even early. And in the case of clustering clump forming rattans, only 2/3 of the clump is harvested. The cane is cut slightly above the base, 30 centimeters above the base, and the upper immature part is discarded. Replanting is done after the 4th harvest. 4 harvest cycles are over. And traditional harvesting is a labor-intensive process involving men, and therefore mechanical harvesting methods have been explored with the aid of vehicles and winches. And these need to be popularized to make harvesting efficient. I have listed out here some of the future prospects for rattan plantations, and policy changes are required urgently in many countries to encourage rattan plantations. Issues that need attention are concerning land tenure, cutting rights, levies charged for harvesting, and increased participation of rural communities. Programs for conservation of genetic diversity is required urgently, and because of the genetic erosion is happening all around the world as the forests degrade. And this can be achieved through establishment of germplasm collections of all the important species. And genetic improvement programs have to be strengthened, finally leading to genetically superior proveniences being selected. Some amount of work has been done in Malaysia and Philippines towards this genetic improvement program. And later on, multi-locational performance trial and identification of superior genotypes is carried out. And establishment of rattan seed stands for production of quality planting material for future plantations need to be taken up. Supporting this is technology of cloning, where superior selections, once they are made, can be mass multiplied through micropropagation. And of course, this depends on standardizing suitable technology using mature plants after they have undergone a selection. And there are techniques like molecular techniques like using DNA for sex determination at the juvenile stage. Combined with tissue culture, this will help generate plants of either sex and to maintain a healthy sex ratio in the plantations. I have referred to several publications that have come up in different countries by INBAR and other organizations on nursery techniques and the silviculture practice. I'll specifically refer to the recent publication of INBA technical report on establishment of rattan plantations just last month, and several references that have come from different countries, India, Philippines, Indonesia, China, which will guide anyone to the basic principles of propagation, nursery management, and plantation management. Thank you.
Dr. Murali, thanks very much for your presentation. It was very rich, and we have been able to deepen our understanding on the different scientific principles that you have gone through in terms of species selection, in terms of site species matching, how to determine which species is suitable for which planting ecological zones, the different propagation method, the different harvesting quotas, the different forms of plantations that you have mentioned in terms of commercial plantation, in terms of plantation for edible shoots, in terms of plantation for ecosystem services. But most that was appreciated is the fact that you were able to draw our attention to future prospect. What should be done for us to be able to reverse this trend in terms of enacting, incentivizing policies that are going to support the development of rattan plantations, in terms of land tenure, addressing land tenure issues, rights to harvesting. Land tenure, I would say, is a major problem even in Cameroon, where the law is not very clear on who owns the resource. Is it the local population, or is it the person who has planted? So land tenure issues, it's something very important. You've talked about genetic research in terms of cloning everything, and most importantly, gender mainstreaming, which is to involve women and girls in the business of growing rattan, first at the level of the nursery, then in terms of plantation. So thanks very much. I would definitely be returning to you with questions that we are going to harvest from our audience. So I'm going to move to the next very excellent researcher, which is Dr. William Basolo from the University of Philippines, Los Banos. So Dr. Willie has been researching a lot on rattan, and for today we are blessed to have him to enlighten on the characterization of plantation growth rattan. So Dr. Willie, over to you. Maybe you have to unmute your microphone. You're still muted.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Renee, for that very nice introduction. And I would like also to express my appreciation to INBAR for allowing me to present the results of my research several years ago on rattan plantation. So the topic, the title of my talk is the characterization of rattan plantation, a feasible way in sustaining the rattan industry while preserving the wild rattan resources. As mentioned by the previous speakers, the significance of rattan as a raw material for a number of products, furniture, baskets, as well as for food, and how it contributes to the economy of the world, as mentioned earlier, that it is worth around 6.5 billion annually dollars. While in the Philippines, in the 1980s, rattan is one of the major dollar earner of the country, just next to timber, which has an approximate net worth of around $98 million. However, as mentioned also by our previous speakers, due to the continued decline in natural habitat due to forest destruction, we are now experiencing a significant decline in the productivity of the rattan industry. And however, we are very highly dependent on the natural forest for raw material requirement. And because of this, it's already reduced because of the destruction. That is why we really need to find other sources of raw canes for us, for the industry or the rattan industry to survive. So this is just a picture of how the decline, the drastic decline of productivity of rattan furniture export in the country. From as high as around 89,000 dollars. It's now only around the net worth is around 15. So there's a reduction in this is a 10-year period only. So the solution is really rattan plantation. As they reported earlier, so in other countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, they have massive planting of rattan. However, in the Philippines, we only have several hundred hectares. And this planted rattan is not mainly for production or for utilization, but for research purposes only. But again, we need to have an inexhaustible supply of raw canes. That is why rattan plantation is crucial. The problem is, in wood, there's a notion that if the material is grown as a plantation, its quality is a little inferior to naturally growing trees because of the presence of juvenile wood. But so there's also a question here for rattan. Whether the quality of plantation-grown rattan cane is comparable or similar, as well as, of course, we have to consider the growth performance in plantation, whether the growth is better in plantation as compared to wild, as in growing in the natural forest. So this talk is actually about the promotion of the use of plantation-grown rattan canes. Particularly, the sample that I've used in this, because this is massively, or this is the only species or that is commonly used in plantation. In the Philippines, we call it the Calamus merrillae or locally known as the palasan cane. So as presented earlier, that the good thing about rattan is that it can be planted as an intercrop with timber species. Like for example, this one, it is intercropped with acacia mangium. So I divided the talk into 3 parts. Number 1 is the characterization of plantation-grown canes. Number 2 is the performance of these rattan canes, growth performance in plantation. And I tried also to relate whether the different site conditions where these canes are growing can affect the cane quality. So basically, I collected samples from different parts of the country, as from the Luzon, or the major island of the Philippine Philippines, and of course I also collected samples in the Leyte or the Visayas group of islands, as well as Visayas group of islands. Yeah. And these plantations are of different ages. But of course, to standardize the collection of the sample, I only collected a portion of the basal part of the cane as well as the topmost portion of the cane. And the cane properties that I measured was the mechanical properties, particularly the modulus of elasticity, the modulus of rupture, using a typical universal testing machine, as well as the Obenrite specific gravity. I also determined the fiber percentage. We know that the structure of the rattan cane is basically made up of 2 tissues, main tissues, the fast vascular bundle as well as the ground parenchyma cells. And from the vascular bundle, we have the fiber cap, which it provides the mechanical strength of the raw material. So in this case, I only determined the fiber area percentage of this fiber cap. I also determined, the softening temperature. So rattan cane is basically heated, for it to be transform into for it to be reconfigured to different designs and different sizes. So what is critical about this is the softening temperature. It is the temperature wherein maximum bending is occurred without, of course, ruining or destroying the mechanical attributes of the material. So here I use a fabricated thermomechanical analyzer, which measures the strain or the deflection as I increase the temperature. So the typical result for this study is this graph. So I provided a constant load to the sample, and then I increase the temperature. So as the temperature increases, I try to measure the amount of deflection and determine or take note, record the maximum deflection. Record also the temperature where that maximum deflection occurs. So this is actually the softening temperature of the material. I also determined the cell wall composition. So the cell wall is made up of the three major components. We measured the cellulose, the hemicellulose, as well as the lignin content of the material. And in part two, with regards to the growth rate, I determined the soil characteristics, particularly the pH, the organic matter content, the nitrogen, the potassium and phosphorus content. I also determined the elevation where the sample was growing, as well as the amount of sunlight. In the previous presentation, we all know that growth is highly affected by the amount of sunlight exposure that the plant is receiving. And of course, finally, the growth rate. I determined the growth rate. So as the results, for the mechanical properties, this is the graph of the modulus of rupture. And in this graph, I also incorporated the sample that was taken from the wild or from the natural forest. And the black one represents the basal portion, and then the light colored bar represents the topmost portion. And these are the plantation grown canes collected from the different sites. As you could see, if just to compare, I will just consider the basal portion. From the natural or from the wild canes has a modulus of rupture of around 45 megapascal, while for the plantation grown, it ranged from around 15 megapascal to about 50 megapascal. So this is only for the basal portion. As for the modulus of elasticity, again, comparing the wild cane, it is around 7.9 per gigapascal, while the plantation grown ranges from around 5.8 to around 9.7 gigapascal in modulus of elasticity. So, to determine whether there are, there's we can see that there's differences based on the raw data, but in order to really see whether these differences is significantly different, I subjected the data to a analysis of variance. And as you could see, the modulus of rupture as well as the modulus of elasticity, this is the F computed and the F tabulated. So the decision criteria here is that if the F computed is higher to the F tabulated, the difference is significant. But as you could see here, because the F computed is lower than the F tabulated, I could say that the modulus of elasticity, regardless of whether the sample is plantation grown or taken from the natural forest, is not significantly different from one another. Similarly, the modulus of rupture is not significantly different. So this is for the fiber percentage. Again, let's just consider comparing the basal portion, the black portion. So the fiber percentage for the natural grow, the wild cane is around 39%, while for the plantation, it ranges from around 22 to as high as 48%. As for the oven-dried specific gravity, again considering only the basal portion, 0.56, the specific gravity for the wild cane, while for the plantation grown, it ranges from around 0.48 to 0.62. Again, to compare if they are significantly different, a statistical analysis was conducted, and ANOVA showed that the fiber percentage as well as oven-dried specific gravity was slightly different from one another at confidence level of significance level of 95%. So this the softening temperature. Again, considering only the black bar graph for the basal portion, here the natural or the wild cane had a softening temperature of about around 94 degrees Celsius, while the plantation grown was about 74 to around 90 degrees Celsius, the softening temperature. So analysis of variance showed again that the softening temperature did not differ from one another. So it's not significantly different. So as for the chemical components of the cell wall, here the cellulose content, the average cellulose content of the natural or the wild cane ranges from around 55% as compared to the plantation grown, which ranged from around 42% to around 54%. And while for the hemicellulose, the basal portion for the wild cane was around 20%, while for the plantation grown, it ranged from around 21 to up to 34%. While for the lignin, the natural is around, or the wild cane is around 20%, while the plantation grown was from 18 to about 39%. Statistical analysis showed that, again, the cellulose, the hemicellulose, among the three, only the cellulose content was not significantly different from one another. The hemicellulose as well as the lignin was significant at significance level of 95%. So to summarize, based from the results, I could say that the properties of plantation-grown canes, specifically the mechanical properties as well as the softening temperature, did not differ significantly from the wild rattan cane. So meaning that the mechanical properties of plantation-grown cane is more or less equal to wild rattan canes that we commonly use for the furniture industry. And this would show, this would prove that the plantation-grown canes are not inferior in qualities to wild rattan canes. So they are more or less comparable to one another. As for the site characteristics and growth habits, this is the raw data that was taken from the different sites. And here it's interesting to note that the wild, the cane or the sample, the soil sample from the wild is neutral, while the plantation grown. So this is similar or parallel to the report a while ago that the cane prefers acidic soil. So in terms of elevation, the sample was taken so it was exposed. For example, in terms of sunlight, the percent sunlight exposure ranges from around 21% up to as high as 90%. So more or less exposed, highly exposed to the sun. While the elevation ranged from 10 meters above sea level for some location, while as high as around 980 meters above sea level. So for the plantation grown, this is the total length of the samples that was measured. So as you could see here, that this actually represents an increasing age of the sample. So this was planted 1984, planted 1986. This was planted in 1990. This was planted in 1997, and as you could see here, that the one planted in 1990 gave a very long, up to 53 meters of total length. This means that with regards to growth rate, again, those planted in 1990 showed a very high growth rate, as high as around 3.57 meters per year. Comparing it with the previously reported results, here, it is comparable. The plantation that was used in the study was comparable in terms of growth rate to the study reported by Dransfield and Manokaran, and of course by Gaddis in 1987. So now I try to correlate these different parameters to the growth rate. Soil characteristics, for example. Here, soil pH was correlated with the growth rate, and as you could see from the graph, the trend was as the soil pH increases, or as the soil tends going towards neutral soil pH, the growth rate increases. While for organic matter, as the organic matter increases, the growth rate decreases. So this is actually expected, because when the organic matter is high, meaning to say that the nutrient is not yet available to the plant, because the organic matter is still on the top of the soil. So here you could see that as organic matter again increases, the growth rate decreases. Well, for nitrogen content, similarly, as the nitrogen content increases, the growth rate also decreases, negative the relation. As for potassium, here a positive correlation was observed, that as you increase the potassium content of the soil, the growth rate of the rattan cane increases. And then finally, the phosphorus, again, a slight increase in the growth rate was slight, as you increase the phosphorus content, the growth rate also increases. While as for try to relate again the effect of elevation and amount of sunlight on the growth rate, here you could see that as the site where the sample was collected goes or increases, the growth rate decreases. So inversely proportional to the growth rate is the elevation. As for the sunlight exposure, here as you expose the cane to more sunlight, the tendency is to produce more cane. So the growth rate is directly proportional to the amount of sunlight exposure. So as for the summary in the relationship, cane development varied between sites, and it is highly affected by the growing condition in the area. And what is crucial here is that it showed that the growth rate was dependent not only on one site parameter, but on the intertwining relationship of all the characters or all the parameters studied used in this study. Finally, the site influence on growth rate. This one is basically a typical equation that I derive using multiple regression to show the impact of the different parameters that I use, for particularly sunlight, elevation, pH, organic matter, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium content on the growth rate of the rattan cane. So this is the multiple regression line. Influence of the growth rate on the different properties. Here, you could see that as the growth rate increases, the modulus of rupture was minimally affected. Actually, if we would consider the correlation coefficient, which is R, actually it's not significant. So meaning to say, regardless of growth rate, the modulus of rupture of our plantation grown is the same. Similarly, when we correlated the growth rate with the modulus of elasticity, as you could see that more or less the curve is a little flat, meaning to say, although we could see a negative trend, but this negative trend is not significant. So I could say that from this, that regardless of growth rate, the modulus of elasticity is not affected. Fiber area percentage, there is a significant relationship with growth rate, that as you increase the growth rate, the fiber area percentage also increases. The Obenreich specific gravity is inversely related to growth rate, but as you can see, considering only the regression correlation coefficient here, it is not significant. As for the influence of elevation on the mechanical properties, here, the modulus of rupture was not significantly affected by the elevation, meaning regardless whether you plant it at a high elevation site or compare it to a low elevation site, the modulus of rupture would be more or less the same. Similarly, modulus of elasticity showed the same trend.
I think Dr. Willie's connection has a problem now.
Well, Dr. Willie, can you hear us? So Dr. Willie has encountered a technical problem. So what we are going to do is to pause him first and take a series of 2 questions. And then we are going to see if we can come back to Dr. Willie for him to finish on this very interesting presentation that he was sharing. Dr. Willie, can you hear us?
Unmute yourself.
Please unmute your microphone.
Continue. I have a few more slides.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. So share, where is that one again? Huh? Yep, share. Technical, okay. Can you see now my presentation? Hello?
I cannot see your presentation. I don't know if others can see the presentation. Jinwei, can you see the presentation?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, sorry. Remove my glasses. Where are you? Open here. Okay. There. What's that? There. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can you see it now?
Not yet.
No. Okay, it's coming in.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
thank
coming
you.
in. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Again, I was talking about the amount of sunlight, and as you could see here in the graph, that it showed that even though you increase the amount of sunlight, the strength property, the modulus of elasticity is not significantly affected. So as a summary, the growth rate did not influence the structural, physical, and mechanical attributes of palasan canes grown in the plantation. Likewise, elevation and the amount of sunlight exposure have no influence on the mechanical properties of the cane. Meaning to say, this shows that really plantation is a viable source of raw material for the industry, because even though you plant it in a high elevation, you plant it in a low elevation, you expose it to high sunlight, the properties more or less is the same. But what is highly affected by this varying site condition would be the growth rate, only the growth rate. Again, site quality would have a big influence only on the establishment period, because it has a big impact or direct impact on the rosette stage or the grass stage of the rattan plants. That is why during the growing stage, it should be that the growing condition would be optimal for the plant to grow, for the plant to produce cane, because this rosette stage sometimes takes takes at least 3 to 5 years before it produces a cane. No, so we have to improve the growing condition for the cane to produce, for the plant to produce more cane. So as milestone in this study, it showed that the palasan canes or the Calamus merrillae Beck are ideal plantation species because they grow in any kind of site, and its stem quality is minimally affected by various site characteristics. And here again, I would like to stress out that we can use plantation grown canes because the quality, the property of these plantation grown canes is more or less comparable or more or less equal to canes growing in the natural forest. And that's all. So in Tagalog, in my native language, thank you very much, or maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Dr. Willie, we are the one thanking you for this very rich presentation on a very scientific approach on the comparison of the properties of plantation grown canes and that grown in the wild. But you did good to raise the importance in terms of the drop of the economic revenue that that Philippines draw from the industry over 10 years. We saw how the export or the production of furniture has reduced, and we also appreciate the fact that some countries has really taken the lead in terms of planting rattan, with Indonesia having 37,000 hectares, followed by Malaysia. And I think the result of your study shows that this country anticipated, because the properties of a planted rattan and that grown in the wild are quite similar. So your study focuses on the palasan cane, if I'm not mistaken, and
yes,
you did a lot on looking at modulus of elasticity, modulus of rupture, the fiber percentage, softening temperature, soil related. And I think to cut it short, the most important conclusion to draw is that this site condition does not really influence the performance of the planted rattan canes, and this has led you to conclude that wild rattan is actually not very different from planted rattan, and this should go to inform our policymakers that planting rattan is a sustainable way of regenerating this resource, and that from a scientific perspective there is not much difference in terms of the performance. Dr. Willie, thanks very much for this very rich presentation. We have questions for you, so please don't leave. I will start first of all with Dr. Srekumar. Dr. Srekumar, I would like to thank you again for your presentation. We have two questions for you. The first question comes from a friend who is joining us from Ethiopia, and he or she wishes to know if there is any study that has been conducted in India which addresses edible rattan shoots for medicinal purposes. So do we have any study in India which is focusing on edible rattan shoots for medicinal purposes? And the attendee also cited a study of Grace Furyu on nutritive functional agents in rattan shoots, a food eaten by native people in the Philippines, stated that tender rattan shoots have anti-inflammatory and inhibitory potential to human tumor cells proliferation in vitro studies. So have you come across this study? And what would be your view to this? What would be your answer to this question? The second question addressed to Dr. Srekumar comes from Serge Kamga. I suppose he may be based in Cameroon. And his question is, at which level of the development of the rattan the symbiotic relations with an ant is found, and what are the characteristics of that relation? So Dr. Srekumar, please, could you go ahead and address these two questions?
Thanks, Reni. With regard to the edible shoots, we don't have much work on in-depth studies, especially its anti-cancer and other properties. Especially in India, only few works, mainly on basic phytochemical analysis, which are the factors like a percentage of carbohydrate, protein, and other nutritional aspects. So only such preliminary studies are only available. So in depth studies, it is not well addressed as such. Then with regard to this rattan and ant relationship, so the species like Corthalsia, it is having well developed ochrea. So it is a kind of a mutualistic relationship. The ants providing protection, and the rattan will provide the basic dormatia like structures. So it is when the leaf sheath getting developed in such stages, it is some species and species are specific to particular rattans. So such kind of a complex pattern of relationship are seen in a lot of papers are already seen. One study in African rattans by Dr. Terry, and recently one a paper on all the Corthalsia species on Malaysia and Indonesia. So a complex pattern of relationships are well studied between rattans and ants.
Dr. Srekumar, thanks very much for the answer. I think our attendees, they will be able to revert if they need further insights on the answers that you have provided. So the next series of questions will be addressed to Dr. Murali. Dr. Murali, Dulce Blanca, our friend from Philippines, she's asking you a question that to me is related to policy. What new incentives will you recommend at the local, regional levels to encourage more sustainable rattan community plantations? That's the first question to Dr. Murali. The second one is from Dr. Abel, our very good friend. He's asking, can all species be produced in plantation, or are there some species that will not be suitable for plantation? Dr. Murali, please, could you step in and address these two questions?
Yes, regarding the question on what policy changes would be required, this would be specific to each of the countries where the plantations are there and the kind of government policies in existence. But I would say that the priority should go for the local communities who are familiar with rattans. They often collect, they are the only ones who collect the rattans. They would know how the stocks go down. They would know how to collect the best canes. And we need incentives for them to encourage them to take up plantations. Initially, it need not be plantations outside the forest area. It could be supplementary planting where harvesting the stocks are gone down. So what would be the incentives provided? It could be in the long-term land tenure given to them for keeping their interest. And it has been seen in many countries that too short a period of land tenure discourages them from taking up these activities. Then there will be the question of government charging them levies or taxes for the amount collected. We should examine whether this is really an incentive because in many countries, whatever taxes collected is not flowed back into the Rattan plantations. So it's merely a small source of money for the government without doing any benefit. Whereas there have been suggestions that this levy collected could be flowed back into the Rattan plantation sector to encourage the people, the collectors themselves to take up plantations. So that would be one issue. The second is, as I said, the gender issue where women are involved in certain kind of activities. This would normally mean the cleaning of the rattan and the processing that goes before it is sold, cutting into pieces, maybe polishing and that kind of thing. And when it comes to utilization, I think there is a role for women in many of the rattan growing countries. So we need policy support for this kind of activities. The financial implications of undertaking plantations. These are unorganized communities who might be not having access to the kind of funds required. So the government could look into that aspects also. So this in short is are some of the issues that needs to be looked into country-wise. And there needs to be a good survey done by professionals to understand what are the other hurdles that prevent rattan from not attaining the status of, say, bamboo, whereas the furniture always remains in fashion and the demand is always there. So rattan is kind of being ignored in many countries, probably because it is found in the forest in plenty. But we know by now that that scenario is totally wrong. We need to have plantations to ensure sustainability. So to have plantations, we need policy changes. And for that, each country has to actually work on studying, doing surveys and getting out the details. I can not say much from the perspective of India because we have state-owned forests in most cases. And we, of course, have interacted with the government. We have actually implemented, when we saw that the stocks are going alarmingly down, we recommended to the government to stop harvesting for many years, and that was implemented. So I can give you an example of right here in Kerala that could be done. So these are the kind of interventions that we as a research community or people knowing rattans could influence the policy makers. I hope I've answered your question. As to the second question of Dr. Abel, we do not know for sure because there's such a diversity of rattan species around the world, and in each country there is a big diversity, and only a few of them have been ever tried out as plantations. So we will not know for sure until we have experimental plantations. But we can see examples of many rattans. I know in the early days when transfer of plant material was not a problem, we had a lot of rattans from Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines growing in our species collection here. They seems to do well. So the indication is that yes, a lot of species could come up in different areas in plantations, but we cannot be sure for all the species. For example, the ones that are growing in tropical evergreen forests, how would it perform in a different scenario? We do not know for sure. I hope I've answered that question too.
Dr. Murali, thanks very much for the answers to the questions. I hope you have been able to address the concern of the attendees, and I hope they will revert to us if they have further questions on this. So now I'm going to turn to Dr. Willie Abasolo. So Dr. Willie, the first question I have for you is also from Dulce Blanca, a very good friend from the Philippines. She says, what are the top best practices in rattan cane furniture in terms of preservation, refurbishing, refinishing, and increasing durability? So that's the first question she's asking from her. This second question is not from her, it's from an attendee. What can be done to reverse the trend in the drop of the rattan trade in the Philippines? So for a country like Cameroon, we have noted that there's increasingly a decrease in interest by the youth in the rattan industry. They are really moving to other businesses. Is this a similar situation in the Philippines? So Dr. Abel also has a question for you. So what are the samples tested for the different experiment you conducted? Were they tested wet or dry? And what was the moisture content of the rattan cane? That's the first question, Dr. Abel. And the second question is, the average age of the sample at harvest was also not mentioned. Is that possible? Is it possible to mention that, or did he miss it? So, Dr. Willie, if you are following, over to you.
Can you please repeat the first question?
Yes, I can repeat the first question. So it was from Dulce. She was asking, what are the top 3 best practices in rattan cane furniture in terms of preservation, refurbishing, refinishing, and increasing durability?
So basically, in the finishing and increasing the preservation was to apply chemicals also, of course, to ensure the minimal attack of fungi as well as insects. I think that's the best one. Of course, drying is also important. The rattan cane has a very high moisture content. So to reduce the attack of insects, fungi, you have to dry it as soon as possible. If not, it would be infested by stain fungi as well as the powdered frost beetle. So maybe that's the two most important things that we need to do in order to preserve the cane. While for the finishing, it is also related to the drying process, because if it's wet, you cannot really finish it well. So drying is very important, as well as the preservation of the cane using insecticide as well as fungicide. As for, I hope I was able to answer that. Number 2 question was, again, what is the number 2? Sorry, you're muted, I think.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Willie.
Yes. Number 2 is, again?
Reverse the trend in the drop of the rattan trade in the Philippines.
Oh,
and what
okay.
about the interest of the youth? Are the youth decreasingly getting discouraged in this industry?
Yes, definitely, because of the new technologies, gadgets that they have. They prefer to work in other industries not related to forestry and agriculture. Actually, it's a very big challenge for us to really encourage the youth to go back to agriculture and forestry-based activities. With regards to the decrease, it has something to do actually with the raw material source. As of now, we cannot harvest actually rattan canes from the wild because it's very limited. Not so many rattan resources in the wild that can be harvested anymore. What we do is we import rattan canes from Indonesia and from Malaysia. And as earlier mentioned by our previous presenter, that there's sometimes, you know, in Indonesia they do not allow the export of raw canes now. So that's why there's really a drastic decline in the productivity of the industry. We don't have so much raw material to process. So that's why plantation establishment is very crucial as in if not no more rattan canes or rattan products that will be derived from the country. And finally, the last one is about the last question.
Okay, 1 minute. So the last question was from Dr. Abel. Were the rattan sample tested by you, wet or dry? What was the average moisture content? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is the average age of the samples at harvest was not mentioned, or did I miss it? So what was the average age of canes?
Okay, well, the moisture content, yes, to remove the impact of moisture content on the properties that I measured, I use green condition. It is above 30%, so that shrinkage swelling will not happen, and that that as you decrease the moisture content, the tendency is the mechanical properties, the modulus of rupture, modulus of elasticity increases. And I do not want that to happen because it would add variability to my study. So what I did, I used green condition, above 30%. Okay. As for the second question, so the age, I forgot to mention the age, but it's indicated in the graph. So basically, what I do here is that the planting time, for example, if you notice, 89. So that means it was the plantation was established in 1989, 1990. So basically, the age varies really from 7 years old na rattan plantation to up to around 15-year-old plantation. So that's it is. However, age could have an impact also on the measurement, on the conduct of the experiment. So what I did to eliminate that, I took samples only for all of them, the basal part as well as the top. So it represents the oldest portion of the cane as well as the youngest portion of the cane, in order to eliminate the possibility of the age effect in the study. So I hope I was able to answer that question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Willie. I have a question for you. This is not from an attendee, it's from myself. How will you compare the rattan and the bamboo furniture in the Philippines? Which one is generating more revenue and which one has a broader prospect, and why?
Bamboo, I think, has a better, the market for bamboo is increasing. Although again, there is high demand for rattan. However, we cannot produce so much product coming of rattan because we don't have raw material. So maybe if we have raw materials, I would say that still rattan would have a bigger role or a bigger part of the economy. However, we don't have so much raw material now. So that's why bamboo is becoming more popular. There's a lot of bamboo raw material. And the good thing about bamboo is that in plantation, after 3 years, you can already harvest. While in rattan, the minimum, depending on the site, the minimum time for the harvest is around 15 years. So that's the one major difference of the two material. Bamboo, you can harvest after 3 years. You can manufacture it. You can process it after 3 years. But for rattan, normally you can only harvest after 10 to 15 years. So meaning, there's a big gap in the cutting cycle. For that reason, the bamboo is more popular than rattan nowadays in the Philippines. Yes. Thank you. I hope I was able to answer that.
Yes, Dr. Willie, you were able to answer my question on that. Thank you very much. The next question would be to Dr. Murali, and it is still trying to address this popularity that bamboo is taking vis-a-vis rattan. So I don't know, has any study conducted in India trying to assess the carbon sequestration potential of rattan or the contribution of rattan to climate change mitigation or attenuation? So is the trend we see now is that bamboo is really overtaking in terms of those regard, that climate-wise bamboo is a very handy tool that we can use to address these problems. What is the potential of rattan, and how do you foresee that?
Well, there has not, as far as I know, there has not been any study specifically on rattan. But there are many researchers looking at different groups of plants in the country. Bamboo has been, of course, studied well, but so are the other components of the tropical forest. I do not know of any specific study where they have looked at the carbon sequestration potential, but I'm sure being a major component of the tropical forest, somebody would be interested in doing that. I shall spread the word around, including my own colleagues in the institute, and there are a couple of research institutes in the eastern part of our country where a lot of rattans grow. I'm sure they would be interested in it. So what is the second part of your question?
Yeah, so we know that bamboo is useful for climate change mitigation, attenuation, soil stabilization, etc. Do we have any such study in India about rattan?
No, not yet. Not yet. I don't think, except for the propagation and its taxonomy, classification, description of new species. Most of the studies are on these aspects. And of course, you know about the interest we have on developing standards for rattan and bamboo. I have a feeling that the subject is fairly new, the carbon sequestration, for people to have looked into rattans. I'm sure that somebody will take it up. Yeah, and soil stabilization for rattan specifically, the same case. Nobody has specifically studied rattan, but it must be an interesting research to pursue all around the world.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. I think even right at INBA, there is need to try to balance the interest that we are giving to these two products that we work on. There is much more work that is done on bamboo compared to rattan. So, Dr. Willie, I just have a steady question for you, and the audience would like to know which province in the Philippines have customized rattan furniture market.
As I think, which province? Mostly that we have good quality products of rattan in the Central Luzon province, Region 3, something. Yeah, there are a lot of rattan furniture manufacturers there, but the raw material comes from the other regions, not in Region 3. So it's around Pampanga. You know, if the one that is asking the question knows the Philippines, Pampanga is a lot. There's a lot of rattan furniture manufacturers in that area.
Okay, very good. I see that Dr. Emmanuel Apia is asking for the contact. So Dr. Emmanuel, Dr. Willie is part of the task force. So definitely, if you check on the task force list, you'll be able to have his contact. Like Dr. Srekumar and Dr. Murali, they are all standing members of the task force on rattan, and they have all contributed to the recent publication establishment of rattan plantations. So at this point, I did not see any other questions from the audience. So I would like to thank you you three excellent panelists for your presentation. It is always an opportunity for me to learn from your rich experiences. I hope we shall be able to organize much more webinars on Rattan so that we try to balance this interest with bamboo, because of all the series, this is the very first one that is dedicated to Rattan. Maybe it will be important to look at aspects like the potential of Rattan for energy, for carbon sequestration that we mentioned. I don't know if rattan can be used for interior decoration apart from furniture. So these are all issues that we can dive into. I would also like to thank my colleagues working in the background that we do not see. The first one goes to Jinwei. Jinwei, thanks very much for the pre-test and everything to make this a reality. Thanks to Belmont, thanks to Leslie, thanks to Tinghui. Without your support, this session wouldn't be possible. And I'd also like to thank all the attendees for their patience. We've encountered a couple of technical issues. Thanks for staying tuned and for the vivid questions. So please feel free to send us, if you need further inputs from the panelists, feel free to send us emails. We are going to liaise with them and revert with their answers. So on this, I wish you all a very good rest of the day, if it is the afternoon there or the morning. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon on another webinar session on Rattan. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.